Hey everybody, welcome to IACommand. It's TV Boy here, and we have a special video for all of you. The Season 6 playtesting period has completed, as has the community vote, and so I brought on a few guests to discuss the results of the Season 6 playtest period. We have 4 people join us today. None of them are from the steering committee. I specifically reached out to these folks because we hear from steering committee members all the time, including myself, but I wanted to make sure to get some non-steering committee voices out there into the world. So I specifically reached out to you guys because you had the best records in the playtest league. Either you had really high win rate or you had played a lot of games or both. And so, yeah. I was just going to let you guys kind of sound off. So, Matt, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
And then we also have Joey Galazewski. Joey, how you doing?
Doing fine. How are you?
Great to have you back on the show. Always love having you as a guest. And Destructor, how are you doing?
Heyo, I am sick in bed. That tells you anything about my day.
Well, that sucks.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yup, especially when you've got homework piling up and work that you have to miss out on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show to talk about Season 6 in spite of being sick. I guess we can do a quick intro. Matt, how long have you been playing Imperial Assault skirmish? How did you get into IACP?
I got in through my friend Sushi Cat, or Adam. Been playing for probably about 3 years, all in, something like that. Adam and I used to play for a bit, just one-on-one, and joined the community probably about 2 years ago.
Nice. Herbie, are you there? Okay, Destructor, how long have you been playing, and how'd you get into into IACP?
Well, it is a really weird workaround story, but to make that story short, I was doom scrolling YouTube over COVID and found some board game reviews, and then fell in love with IA there, and then IACP was all that was still going. So yeah, I've been playing for about IACP about a year, IA maybe a year and a half, and as soon as I just hit the ground running, so nonstop since then.
That's cool. You joined during COVID.
Hey,
That's
did I?
awesome.
Okay, yeah, now I hear you. Okay, I gotcha.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you. Sorry about that.
Okay, awesome. So Herbie, we're doing an introduction. So how long have you been playing Imperial Assault, and how'd you get into ICP?
I've been playing now, I think, probably since 2017. I have a buddy of mine who actually joined the Slack community, but he's never really played on IACP, like online on Vassal. This guy Frank, but I started playing at his house because he's got like every board game imaginable. So I started playing at his house, and then with Vassal, I started getting on a little bit before the COVID lockdown, probably like a year before. So I've been playing pretty much on Vassal probably about, what, 2-3 years maybe? 2-3 years? 2 years maybe?
Nice. Awesome. And then Joey, I think we've heard your story, but if you want to quickly share how long you've been playing and how you got into ICP.
Yep, I've been playing since the Hoth box came out, whenever that bloody came out at this point. And I started playing Skirmish when Bespin came out, and yeah, just kind of been with IACP since it started, so there you go.
Okay, sweet. So let's jump into...
2016, I think that was. Often spin.
Hey everybody, just wanted to chime in. We actually recorded over 2 hours of audio from this discussion, so I'm going to divide this video into 2 parts. This first part will be discussion about Season 6 cards, and in part 2 we'll cover more general topics about IACP such as faction balance, complexity, etc. If this type of content is something you enjoy, where I bring on community members to talk about IACP and Imperial Assault, please leave a comment below to let me know. It's a decent amount of work editing 2 hours of audio to add card images at the right time and remove stuff like technical issues and discussions about microphones, etc. All things that hopefully you won't even notice. And finally, if you want to help support this channel, please consider making a donation over at patreon.com/IACommand. Every donation received is a huge motivator for me to continue putting in the work to produce Imperial Assault content for you all. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the video.
Core box was December 2014, so.
Yep, right around then.
Oh man,
It's been a while. So let's jump
Yep.
into
Oh,
the season 6 discussion. I kind of want to. I'll go around and call you guys out how your experiences went. Destructor, can you hear me now?
yeah, I'm good now.
Okay, awesome. So why don't we
Sorry about
start off with Destructor? Why don't we start off with you while yours is working? What was your play experience like? Just kind of you can just kind of talk about what stood out to you the most, maybe while you were playing, and how you did and what you were playing.
If I go on mute randomly, it's because I have to cough.
Okay.
Let's see. What did I play? I spent the entire season playing Mando and Bib. That was about it. I loved the Rebel Troopers. The idea of putting a theme on it is so cool. I was wondering why we didn't do that before, but that was a really good idea. And yeah, just Mando was just such a cool figure. I don't know why I seem to really love the 10-point multi-attack centerpiece figures. So Luke, Han, Mando. I mean, IG has always been a little expensive. IG 11, or no, 88. No, I keep getting mixed up. But yeah, I love those figures. So tried out some Rebel Trooper with some friends, and it's cool, but not my style.
So yeah, you played a
Other
lot
than
with
that-
Bib. It looks like I actually ran all of your most used 6 and 6 figures from my spreadsheet before we started. Looks like you played the most, played Bib the most out of your figures.
I think it's probably by one game, right? And it was that one weird game against Derek where I
Yep.
tried to make a smuggler list.
Yep.
Yeah, smuggler list, and it just fell apart.
So let's jump over to Herbie, because Herbie, I think you had a similar experience, or at least the lists you played. You played a lot of Mando, right? And then what else did you, or talk about that, and maybe what else you played this season?
Yeah, I thought Mando was great. I've used him quite a bit. For me, his different traits I think are awesome. Just the fact that he's not just a hunter, but you can mix him up as a vehicle. You can mix him up as a guardian. I thought that was something that was really, really interesting. For me, I guess one of the reasons I really used him quite a bit was I tend to gravitate towards Queen Piece lists. You know, I know a lot of guys like to kind of, you know, mix it up with lower cost figures. I do tend to like to have at least somebody who's worth at least 9 or 10 points in there. And I thought that Mando was somebody that he was extremely well designed in his ability to attack up close if he had to, but also be able to attack from afar. I also think that just the feeling of playing people quite a bit, that the Guardian traits and the Guardian trait really has been something that I think it stands out right now in defensive abilities, with all the different things they can do. And since he can both do that and also attack, I thought that was something that was pretty attractive to use. The other figures, I like Bib a lot. I think Bib is probably one of the best characters. I thought he was fantastic. Migs is another character I think is really well designed. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different stuff, and I'm sure we're going to be getting into all of it. But yeah, Mando's awesome. He's great.
Nice. So let's jump over to Matt, because I think you had a different experience with what you played the most. Why don't you? Do you want to talk about? I think you played a lot more Rebels, right?
Yeah. I've always enjoyed playing Rebel. I've built a few Rebel lists, and it's sort of the faction that I tend to have the most success with, and you know, characters like 3PO and Hera. So I set out to build a Rebel list at the beginning of a season with as many new Season 6 cards as I could put together, and it didn't really have a lot of synergy, but it seemed to work a lot. So I put Khotan, CT, and Cara Dune all together in the list, and played around with a few sort of supporting figures to maximise that. But it worked well for me. I think Khotan was able to dish out a lot of power tokens, and you could use those power tokens to get across a blast with Cara. And an extra damage with CT, and that ability to use the power tokens and cancel a dodge, was really powerful. It synergizes well with cards like Wild Attack, and if you're playing against white dice defense figures. So, no, I enjoyed playing those guys a lot.
Nice. And then Joey, I think you were playing a lot of Scum in Season 5, but it looks like you may have gone back home for Season 6.
Played a lot of Scum in Season 5. What came out in Season 5?
Or was it Season 4? You were playing like Tuskens or something.
That was a one-time challenge.
Yeah, but now everybody knows you're the Tusken guy.
All right.
Redeem yourself.
That was a while ago. Wasn't
That was
that
a while
Gamorreans
ago.
too?
Yeah, it was Tuskens and Gamorreans. But that's besides the point.
You're the Bantha
That
guy.
was-
No,
Joey.
Found that in the backlog and I just laughed.
Oh, that was fun. But yeah, no, I kind of played. I was kind of everywhere this season, except for Scum, because everyone was playing Mando, and it's like I can't play what other people are playing. That's just not what I do.
You played a lot of Empire, right?
I did play a decent amount of Empire. I like testing. I did a lot of plays with the Snow Troopers on the early part of the season. My idea there was I made a list that had as many 3 dice attacks as I could, and it's like, well, snows and jets, and it did really, really well. I think that the snows having 3 disruptor rifles is a little bit nutty and on the strong side. Tried out the Flametroopers a little bit. Yeah, they're nice. It's nice to make two-figure deployments into 3 figures. It's a nice little thing to do. Tried the Z8s 1 or 2 times. They were interesting. Khotun and CT are great. Let's see. Moff Gideon went through a bunch of iterations, so I'm not sure how to comment on him.
I mean, I can talk about him, but before I do,
Say I do. I don't like him.
So Joey, you mentioned.
I'm just gonna be honest about that one.
You mentioned the disruptor rifles on the snows, and I am going to say this now that before I forget, that Tuca also wanted to say he did not like that the snow troopers could just do disruptor rifle for all 3. But I will mention
I
Tuca
was gonna say that.
played the same list, I think the entire tournament or season, from at least the logs he sent. He only played Mando, Boba, and IG-88 and a Jawa in the same list. So I can imagine having your 12-point figure plinked down by snow troopers is not that fun. But he and Joey and probably some of you all agree on that. I have no dog in the fight with the snow troopers. I have no. Those are not my baby. I should say I was not part of the initial design process for all of this. So I had a baby in December. So the rest of the steering committee took up the task of getting all these cards designed and picking what to put in, and they did a really awesome job with the work. And then I came back in right before playtesting started to help out with some of the graphic design stuff and etc. And then I helped with rebalancing some of the cards. So anyway, I should say I did also playtest this season, which is a rarity for me. Usually I kind of sit out and just watch everybody play and do all the stats and stuff. But I did playtest Moff Gideon quite a bit because he has a combo with Royal Guards where he can defeat something whenever you score points, and then that can trigger a bunch of Royal Guards to get focused. And I always feel like it's my duty to test any Royal Guard shenanigans at this point. So, yeah, and he also had a bunch of hand disruption at the beginning of the season, and that turned out to be not very fun for people to have their hands completely destroyed because he's also a spy. So I advocated
Except in the one case that it didn't work. and then it was useless.
Yeah, but he had that command card that let you look at the opponent's hand in the same timing window. So as long as you waited till
Oh,
you
I
drew
mean
that.
sorry, I mean when it wasn't very helpful. I played a couple games against a friend when he used Gideon in the first 6.0, and I was playing a Rebel Trooper list back when Kotun still had the Pierce one, so I just wiped out his figures so quickly that getting rid of my cards didn't even matter.
Mm. Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
some lists are
it's
a little
that.
more immune than others.
Yeah, this
Um,
is what happens with the weird supportive annoyance abilities.
so let's talk about the updates. So we'll use this section to kind of talk more about the figures that got a lot of updates during this season, and there was quite a lot of updating that happened in season 6. So we'll start off. We were talking about Moff Gideon. Um, we'll start off with him just because we're talking about him already. So 6.0 Gideon, he had all this stuff that let him tear apart another person's hand. You could name a card. He had a command card that let you look at their hand and I think put it on the bottom of the deck. I can't remember. Um, he also had his command card changed, and it became. I actually really like that card. It's the monologue card where you can reveal your
The
hand.
demoralizing monologue.
Yeah, Gideon can reveal his hand, and then if he does, he gets to cancel a defense die. And then they also changed it to where he can name an activation, or he can name a group, and if it activates next, it takes a strain. So, how did you guys feel about Moff Gideon? Also, I should ask, how did people feel about the dark saber on Moff Gideon? Because I am of the firm opinion that the dark saber is a trap. For one extra point, you can always just leave it off, and he should be 6. But I want to hear what you guys think about that. Yeah,
Since I
Joey.
did some decent testing with Gideon, I will say that I stapled the dark saber to Gideon. Because if you think about it, that's an incredibly efficient 1 point upgrade. You get a reroll, and you get extra health, and when the situation arises, an extra little attack. So I think it's an incredibly efficient 1 point upgrade, but then again, I was also running him with melee heavy lists, so it was very useful.
Anybody else have an experience? Oh, go ahead, Joey.
In terms of the abilities, I the strain ability is interesting, but I don't. There's so many unique figures and single deployment groups nowadays that it just feels like the one strain did not really feel that good, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That's it.
I will say.
Yeah, I remember playing against. I played against Joey when he was using Gideon, and he was definitely a presence that was felt. Because essentially you leave him to the end, and then when I only have one figure left, he obviously then constrained that guy. And he did a couple of things. I think I remember you using expendable allies at least once or twice, where you ended up, getting those points. I think he's most useful as that type. I felt him in that aspect of it, where if you kind of build a list around, VP, messing with VP, messing with cards, and have him kind of sitting back a little bit, then he can make his presence felt for sure. But then it kind of conflicts a little bit with his use of the Darksaber, because the Darksaber is kind of giving you more of an incentive to jump into the action. Yet, a lot of his abilities tend to be ones that you're probably going to want to have more of a support figure utilizing. So, yeah, it's kind of like this tension between, is he somebody who should be up close and personal attacking, because he's got some pretty, his attack can be strong, especially because I remember he got focus at least once or twice with him. So he's a figure he's kind of confusing to figure out what his role actually is and how you want to go about using him. But the fact that he's a spy, I think, also lends itself to that, kind of more sitting back a little bit and playing with cards.
Yeah, I want to say real quick that VP ability ended up being a lot stronger than I initially thought when I looked at it. just like when I played him, I kept noticing, even when I lost, like I would notice, wow, I'm way less on material than my opponent, but the score is really close. And then I realized that, oh yeah, I mean, I basically am only giving up officers that would probably have died anyway, and then I'm getting these 4 VPs for each one out of nothing. So
Yeah.
you actually get a lot of VPs from him, and you're not actually giving up VPs. You're just quickening your officers' inevitable deaths.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned I don't mentioned earlier that I don't care for him as much, and I think it all just comes back down to that math of the VPs. Strain is helpful. Attack, of course, is nice. It's really about whether you can get those officers in your lists, and basically if you can commit suicide with them. Because each officer that you include with your list that you manage to get the ability off on is an extra 2 points, which is obviously really nice. But I want to say what it's been a while since I looked at his card. Is it start of activation or start of round?
For the strain.
Which one is it again?
I think it's the end of his activation.
No, the VPs.
Oh, it's whenever you gain VPs from a mission effect.
Oh yeah, and then limit once per round, right?
Yeah, so the timing can be kind of tricky on that for certain missions. Like the Krykna one is kind of hard.
Right. So, because that was really the big thing, is that you're not always set up. So basically, if you miss one of those timing instances where would have gotten an officer and you don't, I mean the second round usually you can include a second officer in your list, wipe out that second officer with him in the second round, and then the third round, when the game's probably going to end after that round anyway, take out the one on the terminal. The trick is just actually getting both of those. And then that adds up to equal 4 points, which then you gotta weigh, is the possibility of 4 points. Normally, that's not necessarily worth it, but then the attack, is his attack worth the 2 points or whatever, right? That's how I look at it, and personally, I never find it worth it, but that's just me.
Yeah. I'll just lastly say I do like that he kind of supports this sub archetype within Empire of this like suicide Empire list that works with things like stormtroopers and royal guards. It's nice to give Empire something that isn't just like Vader or trooper spam or whatever, like its own flavor. So but I think we should move on. We've got quite a few in this section to talk about, and there's going to be some lengthy discussion, I'm sure. Why don't we go ahead and just talk about the big one, which is Mando. So 10-point Mando.
Elephant in the room.
Yeah, he had 2 big updates. I'll start this off just by giving the narrative here, which was his first version was the one that just had the single spear attack with Pierce 2. That ended up being the win rate was very low, even though he was extremely popular, or at least he was getting a lot of reps in from people. So we didn't like that he was not winning very much. So gave him a bit of an update, which was actually my suggestion, was, hey, let's give him a second attack. And that ended up being way too strong, because it was 2 full-powered attacks with an extra pierce on top and the reroll. And then I think there was we changed protective fire, but I'll let you guys talk about that, because that's probably more interesting to you guys. And then with the 6.2, we ended up nerfing him. We brought that bonus attack down, and we took people's criticism that he felt too much like a melee figure, or a pure melee figure, so we did like a mix of melee attack into ranged attack, kind of like Jin Urso. And now he's he's fine. He's totally fine. And
By people's criticism, you probably mean my criticism, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you're a very loud voice in the Slack, but
wow,
we listen. I mean, if we hear criticism that like rings true, then we take it and we run with it. So,
I fought tooth and nail on that one.
All right, who wants to go first?
Go at it.
Who's got thoughts? Herbie, why don't you talk about you played Mando a lot. So what were your thoughts on the whole different versions from 6.0 to 6.2?
Hold on, I think this deserves me cracking open a beer. So one sec. Wait up.
Okay. Well, Matt, I haven't heard from you.
You mean a root beer? Because this is a family-friendly show.
Is it? That's not what I hear.
BYOB.
Especially since you've been
Hey.
jumping in this.
Hey, I'm under 18. That's not allowed.
Matt, what do you?
All
What,
right,
do you have any thoughts, or Herbie, you ready?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Matt. Or if Matt wants to go, that's fine.
I won't take long, Herbie. So I played Mando a little bit in the 6.1, and I didn't play him in 6.2, but I struggled to get him to work. For me, it just my play style, and so I ended up reverting back to Cara Dune. And when we talk about nerfs to Cara Dune, I'm happy to jump in there.
Okay, we'll definitely ping you for Cara Dune when we get there. So Herbie, what do you think?
I think he's in a good spot now, and I think that's that was one of the things that I mentioned on Slack recently was that I think the design has hit a certain balance now that he's in a good place. I had raised the issue of whether or not he should be worth more points than 10 is the question I have, because he does feel like he definitely is worth his points, at 10. The question is whether or not he should be worth 11 or 12, because I think he definitely competes, as being a queen piece at the level of like an IG-88. That I think was the biggest concern for me. Beyond that, I think he's extremely well designed. I love the way he interacts with other Guardians, especially I love running him with Onar, and those guys kind of running tight together, especially with the protective fire. You don't have to worry about essentially you don't have to worry about running other types of him with the child. You don't have to worry about any issues of conditions. And then protective fire, you can kind of combine that his or with Onar's as well. So him with the mobility, I think also with his speed, his inherent block, that he's professional. Like his dice attack are fantastic. If you want to get up close, he can do tons of damage. I don't know. I think that's the issue that I would like to hear what everybody else has to say about it, because I think 10 points is good, but is he worth more than 10? Is it 11 or 12?
Yeah, what do you think, Joey?
Yeah, no, I 100% think he is undercosted, and he's actually the only card I voted to not make it into the season, actually, because for 10 points, there's literally nothing he can't do for 10 points. I would take him over every other queen piece in the game as he currently is. No doubts. I didn't. Even Vader. I think he's better than Vader as he is, and he's only 10 points.
Really? Huh.
Yes. And I will say that in a heartbeat.
I should mention here that
I think he's ridiculously undercosted.
I should mention that
Definitely have some similarities.
Mando was the only card to get the probationary vote from the community out of everything, which was a new system that got introduced. Although I guess we'll talk about that in the next section. But I just want to quickly talk about how does everybody feel about how Protective Fire ended up, because I'll mention that one went through some changes and got some criticism. The first version triggered off of just any figure within two spaces, I think, or any unique figure within two spaces of Mando. We got people saying that it was very hard to remember that it would trigger, and so that was changed to just trigger off of the child companion and Mando himself. And then people didn't like that it I don't remember what it was. People didn't like that it was. I mean, you guys can tell me why it wasn't liked. But then we figured out kind of the what do you call it? The intersection between those two was, let's tie it to the child, and the child can be the marker for who is going to be retaliated against if you shoot them. We really like that as a visual indicator for players that the child companions here, that's the figure you don't want to attack if Mando has line of sight to you. So how did you guys feel about how Protective Fire ended up?
No, I thought it was fantastic. I think it's great. Yeah, it was confusing before, and I think this has kind of just simplified it in a way that doesn't make it so complicated. So, I think it's spot on right now. I haven't, now that I think about it, I don't think I've used it to its full effect because I almost always just put it directly onto Mando. But yeah, maybe I can use it more in a way to actually protect other figures that might be in danger. So, I mean, that's one thing I haven't actually utilized that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more complicated because the 6.1 version you were referring to, Noah, was he protects himself, right? If you shoot at the child or you shoot at Mando, and that really wasn't liked because the goal is that Mando is protecting the child, but it's not very often that you're gonna actually want to shoot at the child since you can't kill it with anything else. You're just not gonna touch it. So that really turned into Mando having return fire, which just didn't make sense for the thematic purpose of him protecting the child. Him just returning fire wasn't necessarily thematic, from what I could tell. That was the main argument against it. And also, it just not getting used as often as maybe it should have, just considering how thematic and flavorful it was, which was where the child thing came in, because you can use it to protect Mando if the child is next to Mando. But I think the main reason, because I think I was the one that suggested putting the marker on the child, and besides even just being super thematic, besides it being a great visual reminder, it really came down to the versatility of the ability, and especially with Onar, because I don't think I would ever run Mando without Onar. Onar is the only other true Hunter Guardian, in my opinion, in the Scum faction. So running Mando without Onar makes no sense. So Onar and Mando being able to protect each other was really the big thing, and that's where I found the most value, is putting the child on Onar. Now once you get extra protection, Mando protects Onar, Onar protects Mando, and since I always run Afra, and I can redraw extra protection, and you just have to find a way to shoot them like a Greedo shot and not get shot back.
Yeah, that was your idea to use the child, and which is a great idea. And I have to say though, it is funny because you say that it was just return fire in 6.1. You had to incapacitate the child to use that ability, and now it's still just return fire but better, but because it specifically calls out the child as being the impetus or the trigger for the ability, I think it reads a lot more flavorfully to people that, oh, okay, yeah, it's the child that matters. It's not you're attacking Mando, you're attacking any figure that shares a space with the child. And I think it's funny how people that clicked better for people, even though it's really close to being the same thing when the child's sharing a space with Mando.
Yeah, because
I forgot about the incapacitating. Sorry.
If the attack, because it can be protective fire. I mean, at this point now, even if the child is next to him, he can still utilize protective fire, right? It's not just a matter of having the child in his space, is it?
No, he has to share a space.
So after an attack, because I'm sorry, no, because I'm looking at the old card that's actually on tabletop right now. I don't think it's the same thing. So.
Yeah, tabletop hasn't been updated with 6.2 still, so we gotta
disregard that.
Sadly. If you guys want, you can go to the IACP website, and under the official changes, it should have all the 6.2 stuff loaded into that PDF for reference. That's right. And I'll try to put stuff on the screen too. So let's talk about the next one that got a lot of updates. And Matt, we'll ask you to cover this one. Cara Dune, she got some major changes, and 6.0, what was it in 6.0 that got changed? She had a +1 block, so she was insanely tanky for 9 points. She had ambush, which let her push someone that was attacking her, and then she could parting blow them, and also the problem with that one was you could push them to a space where they didn't have line of sight to her anymore, and so then it was on the lam. That got fixed in 6.1, and then 6.1, she was doing a crazy amount of damage with Call the Vanguard, and Parting Blow for extra attacks. And we were like, how do we make her good when she's not using those cards, but maybe make her not so strong every time she gets an extra attack? So we nerfed her base attack and made it so she only gets that blue, red, red once per round when she's attacking. So that's kind of the summary of her updates. So Matt, you played a lot of Cara, and we'll probably talk about Cara Dune right after this. What were your thoughts on the updates to Cara Dune?
Yeah, look, I think where you landed was pretty fair. One person's negative play experience is another person's positive play experience, I think, isn't it, TV Boy? And it's fair to say that there were a few people who had a negative play experience playing against me. I think, depending on how initiative was switching, I think there was one game where, I was able to move Cara Dune 8 spaces, which, most people don't think about. And use the smash ability to then self-start a Parting Blow and get a massive blast attack off. Somebody had grouped a bunch of guys together. Initiative swung, start of the next round. I had first initiative with Cara. Cara did another blast attack and, had to clear stun. And then, just left her there. They activated, attack Cara Dune, and I go and ambush and get another. So sort of 3 consecutive blast attacks, almost last 8 or 9, and it took out a huge number of sort of troopers. I think I played it once against Adam and once against Tuka. And so, it's obviously fun when you're doing it, but I can appreciate how when you're on the receiving end, it just doesn't feel balanced. So there's a lot to be thinking about. You've got ambush, Parting Blow, smash, your ability to move, 8 spaces to get a smash attack off, and, then a Parting Blow. So it's all of this stuff chaining together, as you said, Call the Vanguard as well. Very powerful. I found her at the beginning, extraordinarily tanky. She would take a huge amount of damage. And obviously a lot of people would concentrate their fire on her. So, people forgetting about the sort of the support figures, and, Khotan and CT are still capable of doing a lot of damage. So, they were being left unharmed and coming in and sort of mopping up. So I think where you landed was good.
Yeah, that's right. We reduced her total blast. We took that blast 1 off of the +2 damage, which I think people thought was funny when she had to Parting Blow, or when you pushed and Parting Blow, and she'd have to blast herself to get the +2, but it wasn't worth the joke to have all the blast 3. And yeah, she's a ton of fun. I had a ton of fun when I got to kill Han Solo and Hera from full health in 1 activation with her in 6.0. That was great fun, but yeah, probably not so fun for the opponent. What did you guys? What the rest of you think?
On the lamb?
Huh?
No,
He did on the lamb. I still killed him.
What?
Yeah, he on the lammed into my Parting Blow, which I then played Wild Attack, Concentrate Fire. I think I had Hera. No, maybe I didn't have Hera. I had Khotun, so I got the Pierce one. He dodged from the Wild Attack. Khotun didn't care. And he took Smash. I think he took... No, I don't know. But I killed him. Yeah.
That's funny.
Anyway.
Sorry about the laugh. That was that was really funny.
Yeah. So I pushed... Go ahead.
No, sorry. Were you saying something?
Oh, I was saying one of the things I pushed really hard for was ambush. I think we heard a lot from people that was kind of a negative play experience, especially being able to trigger the ambush, trigger the Parting Blow off of ambush, like to interrupt the attack and kill the attacker. I think that was a negative play experience for a lot of people, so that got changed to just do 2 damage, which made it very close, much closer to like Ahsoka's card.
Yeah, I think that was a good change. As I would say, I haven't played Cara because she just didn't click for me, just like how Mando doesn't click for some people. No matter how good they are, like even in 6.0, I still didn't like her value somehow, and even though she was absolutely insane. But I think what it really comes down to is the 2 figures that everybody thought of as so overpowered were thought of as so powerful were Cara and Mando. Right, Mando 6.1, and then now still, some people say he would be 11 points in 6.2. The big thing, one of the big things that it is the negative play experience for a lot of people is the 3 traits. And having 3 powerful traits, something like Mando being a guardian and a hunter, and having multiple attacks to trigger those hunter cards, and synergizing with somebody like Bib, and Cara having those brawler cards and those trooper cards with on the lam and the ambush, and so many cards that it's like you're spending all of your cards on, I think, 7 or 8 cards on Mando attacking a Taro, but then it just leads to the most horrible experience for the other person because you're able to spend all your cards at once. I think Taro had 2 block tokens, had just been readied up with change of plans, and he still had his cavalry charge, so he was getting +2 blocks on top of his black dice, and I wiped him out in 1 activation with Mando because of just being able to play 7 cards in 1 attack. And so many cards all at once was really the big thing for it.
Yeah, I think Cara definitely suffers from that, especially. All right. Any other thoughts on Cara?
I don't know. Am I wrong or?
I think how Cara ended up is in a very good position. I think she's perfect at 9 points as is. Very interesting figure that mixes things up that other rebels can't do.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about her just because I don't use brawlers too much. I'm not very good at it, so.
Okay. Well, let's transition into Kotun. She was, I thought, very strong in 6.0. She was giving out a lot of power tokens. She was giving Pierce 1 on top of the anti-dodge. And then in 6.1, we found... So I was of the opinion, and I think other committee members as well, finding that her excessive amount of power tokens combined with the Pierce 1 was stacking on top of other things in a way that we thought was problematic. So instead of the Pierce 1, which was effectively adding, +2 damage to an attack with a power token, we changed that for a reroll, which looks not great when you look at her command card, does the same thing. But the command card is still good because it gives you a rangeless reroll, and it also still works even after she's dead, for that turn anyway. But what do you guys think? Matt, I'm going to kick it to you again because you played a lot with Kotun. What did you think of her original version and then her update in 6.1?
Yeah, I think the look again, changes that made a lot of sense. So initially, she was dishing out so many power tokens. It was, if you consider that the first round is often about positioning figures. So you accumulate 2 power tokens, which seldom get spent in the first round. So by the time of the second round, you've accumulated 4, and if you've stacked it with something like Cassian Andor, you could have 8 power tokens. Across your figures, it's a lot of power tokens. And certainly felt like, I was never short of power tokens, the ability for people to spend other people's power tokens to start loading 3PO up with damage tokens and stuff, just to find a home for those power tokens. So, certainly the earlier versions, just so many power tokens on top of focus, which I don't know was necessarily sort of a game design of a power tokens typically introduced for the Imperial. But where it landed, it just creates what I like in these sorts of games is multiple pathways. So you're not forced to do a single thing, and you can dish out the power token that best suits your needs at that particular moment. It might be an evade for Han Solo, or it might be a surge for Cara or something. So that optionality, and it just creates so many sort of options for your ability to respond to certain scenarios. It's not a specified way in which a character's played. So she offers that dynamism. She's a long-range hitter. She gets a lot of damage out, and I think her dodge cancel, is powerful and useful. I wonder if it's almost a bit overpowered. It makes white dice characters, puts them sort of in a challenging position where they can't access their dodge. So.
That was
Yeah,
I'll just say that was actually one of the big things in our discussion about changing from Pierce 1 to reroll is that with the Pierce 1 and the minus dodge, you're right. Basically, a white die is pretty useless at that point because you're just getting the evades. So taking away the Pierce, we wanted to make sure that white die were not completely terrible against Kotun, but they are pretty weakened by that ability.
Yeah, my only
Go ahead.
contribution to this conversation is that the Pierce one was so powerful with those tokens. I played the first game I played with her. I managed to take out a full health Dark Trooper, a full health Flame Trooper, and a full health Elite Probe Droid in 2 activations with characters that neither of them cost more than 6 points. I didn't use a single card because I just had all these tokens, all this Pierce, all of this canceling of the dice. It was just insane.
Hey, Herbie, I know those chips are probably delicious, but it would be great if you could mute yourself for that.
You sure about that? You don't want an extra? You want me to send you any?
If you could, that'd be great. But yeah,
I will.
Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, so I think that was pretty good. Wrap up on Kotun unless anybody has anything else to say. We do have some more that were updated. Let's see. Mayfeld was talking about him. Destructor and Herbie will probably have some things to say. So Mayfeld. So all of the Scum figures in Season 6 were underperforming in the first round of playtesting, the 6.0 one. So we kind of tried to buff 2 of them. We'll talk about Bib in a second, but Mayfield got a buff. He got that +1 damage buff because we were like he hits like a wet noodle basically, or paper towel, whatever you have. And so he got a +1 damage buff and something else. I can't remember what it was. But then he hit like a freaking Mack truck, and he was actually doing around as much damage as a normal figure at that point cost was doing, like per round. But because he was doing it all in one attack, people really felt like he was over-tuned for his points. So we ended up adjusting some things. So I think he ended up in a spot. Somebody remind me where he ended up. Where he's got like a return fire, but somebody else tell me. I haven't looked at Mayfield in so long.
He had tokens before. I remember it was both the tokens. I think he had an auto. He had an auto damage, and then he can also give himself tokens.
That's what it was. So yeah, we gave him a new ability to let him have 3 power tokens to kind of feed the rest of his stuff. Oh yeah, and then he could get 2 power tokens after every attack. So that really kept him fed up on tokens, especially if he was doing like return fire.
That was my only contribution to Mayfeld's discussion, was the 3 tokens.
Yeah, that was a good idea. You gotta remind me when it was your stuff, because I can't remember who said what.
Yeah, it's hard to remember how old it goes around. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't see Mayfield in 6.2, so I honestly don't even remember what he does.
Yeah, I actually use Mayfield quite
Billy
a bit.
Goat.
The most recent change,
Yeah.
I think it kind of puts him in a spot
Okay.
where he's not hitting the same way he was before, but he's still hitting very, very hard. It's a solid attack. He's a figure that kind of needs to kind of stay back a little bit and not get too close because, especially if you're taking on, as we've been talking about, Kotun, any figures that can negate dodges, he'll go down. He can go down in one good shot. So he's kind of a figure that you definitely need to be measured with how close you want to bring him in. I think he's in a great spot right now. I think the 7 cost and then his attack is really good, and he's definitely balanced out by his weakness of his defense die.
I agree. The wet noodle jokes will finally come to an end, but it's not a Mack truck anymore. Dude, the amount of wet noodle comments was hilarious. But yeah, he hits hard, not too hard. I think his only real obstacle at this point is just how many 6, 7, and 8 point hunters there are in Scum, because oh my gosh, that's the only thing Scum has at this point. It's 6, 7, and 8 point hunters. I think that's why they're struggling, is because he's great as a smuggler, but I've tried running all smugglers. It didn't go very well. I don't think there's enough to make a smuggler only list, so he's gonna have that uphill battle against all of the other 7-point hunters, but he's a great figure on his own merit.
Yeah, he's kind of in a weird spot as a smuggler, trooper, and scum. Not a bad spot, I don't think, because I think he would just be just as fine if he didn't even have trooper on him as far as scum lists go. But I've seen him used in a lot of Empire lists too as a trooper, and he does pretty good there. So he's an interesting figure as far as like he can go in different places that other scum smugglers don't appear very often. So moving on. All right, big one here. Bib Fortuna. So Bib was pretty well liked in the beginning of season 6. I think Destructor kind of led the charge on. Well, I'll let you talk about that. But 6.2, 6.1, we knew he needed a change for 6.1, but we couldn't figure out what it was, and we couldn't agree on a good one. So we just decided to keep working on him. And then finally we got one. We did like a big brainstorming session right before the 6.2 update and figured out what that like secret magic ability should be that really makes him pop, which ended up being that Zillow technique on offense. And then updated his command card to kind of go with it. So discarding, you get to shuffle it back in if you discard it, and then it's a special action to shuffle a card back into the deck. Both pretty underwhelming effects, honestly, if you look at them on at face value, but together they do a lot of work and actually has been proved to be very strong in the game's results I've seen so far with him. So, Destructor, talk about Bib, because I know you played him a lot, and you had a lot of thoughts on him during the playtest season.
Yeah, dude, Bib is my boy. But just laughing because, my gosh, Zillow technique is like a disease. We cannot get rid of it. Like, we cannot get it out of prevalence, and then now it's spreading onto other characters. It's hilarious. But Bib is my boy. He is so much fun for just what he does. I really like where he ended up with Jabba. I think the synergy with him and Jabba is still definitely there because I've actually had a lot of luck sitting him on the terminal, especially with that leader trait. I always keep coming back to my my Mando, my Hunter Guardian list. The Mando, Onar, Greedo, Afra, Bib, Jabba, Elite, Claudite. Yeah, I think that was, and First Strike. But Bib, with the first strike update, was obviously crucial to him because that's the only way he's going to be able to solo support. But the ability to get multiple focus tokens out without having to temporary alliance is just amazing. Bib plus Jabba is 10 points. That is a quarter of your list, which does mean that's one of the much more heavy duty. 10 points with first strike. Sorry, that is a very heavy duty solution to support. So I do like that there is still a place for, because you can still run Bib, just 4 points. But the only way to get between 4 and 10 points of support then is to use Temporary Alliance, so that still has a place. But that Zillow with, I think, finding out, I played an entire game where I didn't know Dewana Wanga could get shuffled back into your deck just from the reverse Zillow. And that right there was what cemented him as possibly my favorite character out of Season 6, besides maybe Mando, just because getting that extra damage. And I love when for some reason all you have left is Afra and you don't have any Hunter cards, and yet your Hunter cards are still whooping damage on people because you can throw them all away. And even when you don't know if you're going to get a kill, you can just throw cards at it anyway. It's just amazing. Herbie, did you have any more thoughts on him?
Yeah, that is. I think I might have a little bit of something wrong with the connection because is Noah's talking and I'm not responding because I don't hear him.
No, he's not. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, he's one of those figures that I've started to use a lot more as of recent. My big issue probably over there. You know, obviously everybody knows me for my stance on assassinate and all that. But I think what that was more telling of was in regards to just I think that hunters as a faction were just, I feel over the past couple of seasons had lost so much power in comparison to the other two factions. You know, especially in light of the, you know, the increase, you know, with different types of cards that have enhanced the defensive abilities of others. It just made it seemed like it was much harder and harder for hunters to do anything remotely close to what they used to do. So with Bib coming in now and that ability to toss a card, you know, I've always hated Zillow. This to me, it's I've never gotten to the extreme to think that Zillow should be eradicated, but I think this is definitely something that is seen as a balancing out of that ability. So, and I think it also satisfies, at least it kind of satisfies that desire for hunters to gain back a little bit of the oomph that they lost over the past couple seasons. So I'm definitely a big fan of his. And I, as Destructor said, one of the things that I think I haven't taken advantage of as much as he has is that ability to toss cards, but then, you know, to Wanawanga, you can toss it, but then, you know, or you can shuffle things back in, which I think is the key to it. So he's definitely a character that I every time I use him, I want to kind of figure out a little bit more and more of how to better use him, you know, than I previously did. So he's an exciting character. I think he's a great addition to the Scum faction. I think he synergizes quite well. You know, he adds that focus element. You know, I actually don't run him that much with First Strike, just because, yeah, it's great to use him with First Strike, but you know, I feel two focuses, especially with hunters, since they're not necessarily jumping into the action the second round right off the bat. Sometimes I kind of reserve it for the second round and then use that extra point elsewhere. So he's great. I think I've really liked the additions that overall the Scum faction has gotten with Bib, Mando, and Migs.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on what Destructor said about Zillow. So that did come up, certainly while we were talking about that update, is because Zillow is a contentious card a bit within the community. You know, some people love it, some people really hate it. But I think the thing that is problematic about Zillow, more than the discarding, is the exhausting to negate 2 pierce, because that's what really makes the card so strong, is you can exhaust it for free each round to basically prevent 2 damage. But the discard is not as problematic. You're giving up a real resource for a small benefit. And I should say the reasons we liked it and we're okay with that was, number one is it's attached to a figure. So with Zillow, you can't kill the Zillow. Your opponent always has it and there's nothing you can do about it. With Bib, if you can get into their backline somehow, you can eliminate Bib and you remove access to that ability. The other thing that I really liked about it, and I pushed for this ability to get added, was, and I've been trying to get some kind of ability like this into Scum for a long time, is that it gives Scum a way to ditch dead cards, which they have not had a wide access to until Bib. All you had really was Black Market Prices, which is a command card that you can use once, maybe twice with Afra. But now with Bib, if you've got a dead card, like unique figures card, which otherwise, you know, you're pretty discouraged from playing without some kind of discard outlet. Now you can run those in your list more freely, and you know that if you've got Bib, well, if my figure dies before I draw his card or their unique command card, then I can just ditch it for a +1 damage and not have to feel too bad about it. So
yeah.
Joey,
Real quick,
Matt,
before we move on, I do want to mention,
Oh no, I was gonna ask Joey and Matt if they had any thoughts.
Oh no, yeah, but it's a final closing thought. Just
Yeah.
you guys have any opinions on Bib?
Not a huge fan of Scum. I think they're scumming, and I think Bib is in a good place, and I like his design.
Yeah, I like what they've introduced. I think it's a good addition to the Scum faction.
And I should give a shout out to the original concept, because I think we've been talking up the newer part of Bib here, but Derek's original concept for the like a scum figure that you can't bring Rebel care package to use was really interesting, and I think is going to do a lot for adding a lot of diversity to scum lists, where now you're going to have scum lists that play rebel care package and they're going to play a certain way, and then you're going to have bib lists that play a slightly different way and have a different feel to them than the rebel care package.
Yeah, that's probably what makes them my favorite. But the one last closing thought I had to say is, I don't know if people have been taking advantage of it, but I know I have with Afra, because I think making Bib a leader was also an interesting thing, because with Dewana Wanga, the combo is insane. You put him with Jabba, and then what you can do is, if you get planning round 1, which Jabba gets you that extra card, so you're going through a third of your deck before you even get through round 1. But if you can get planning at least in the round before you're going to go into your action, so that's round 1, might be round 2, depending on if you end up fighting in round 2 or round 3, then you can play planning on Bib, put him on the terminal, and then Afra can redraw planning and he can replay planning, which ends up getting you through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cards in the second round of the game, which is absolutely insane. And then, of course, you can... Actually, I think that's 12 cards, because... Yeah, 12 cards, because planning. So you can get through 12 cards in literally 2 rounds, which is absolutely insane. And then you play Dewana Wanga, and that's getting shuffled into your deck. So now, by the end of round 3, you've gone through your entire deck, and every time you use Dewana Wanga, you're going to get it back the next round, which is just hilarious. And I've done that on quite a few people now. It's just amazing to be adding damage every single round and getting it back every single round and have gone through your whole deck. Because then you get like Mando and Cara with the playing 7 cards in one activation. It's just hilarious.
Yep, and I'll just say people should play more Rest in Peace. Moving on. So let's see.
Shift.
So
That is very true.
Let's see. I don't want to miss anybody. Mando. Let's talk about First Strike real quick. First Strike got updated, so that, I guess that was kind of the sideways update to Bib in 6.1. First Strike, it was lowered to 1 point, but it didn't work with Bib's not weird, but his ability that gained a VP from like card effects. So that First Strike was changed to work with that ability. So if you ran them together, you would have 5 VPs and your opponent would have 4. We removed that ability to make room for the Lizzo technique thing on Bib Fortuna, which means that First Strike is kind of just doing what it was doing before. Any thoughts on First Strike? I think you guys kind of talked about it. It sounds like Herbie, you feel like First Strike is not necessary with Bib, and Destructor, you like to take First Strike with Bib. Is there any other thoughts people want to share on First Strike?
It was
Just
a
that if
change
Bib
that
does
needed to
end up-
happen.
Sorry,
guys.
No,
Go ahead,
you're
Joey.
good.
What were you saying? And then
It was a dead card before the change, and just making it 1 point made it, actually usable, and I appreciate that, because usable cards are always better than unusable cards.
Nice. And Destructor, what were you saying?
Oh, just that if Mando does end up getting bumped up to 11 points, that's probably the only thing I'll drop from my list. But that it's a good change, important change.
Nice. All right. Flametroopers were the last one. They actually got updates in all the seasons. Big updates. I'm not going to talk about Z6 and Echoes here, just because their updates are pretty small. But Flametroopers, they started off with a special keyword that was the napalm tokens.
Napalm.
Yes, napalm tokens, and that was kind of weird, because it was like, what does a napalm token do? And we didn't do a good job of making it easy to figure that out. So, reading the card didn't explain the card. And we were already kind of fighting with that. With this season, we changed keywords to move up into the keyword area. So professional, priority target, and not mobile, efficient travel, I think, got moved up to the to where all the keywords live, like mobile and massive, which means that players can't read them on the card to know what they do. And then I think Flametroopers got rebalanced in 6.2. They got an extra Pierce one to make sure they could trigger all their stuff. And I think we changed Weaken to Bleed to kind of simulate that burning flavor of like setting something on fire. Curious to hear, Joey, why don't you go first? Because I know you play Empire, so what were your thoughts on the Flametroopers?
Well, I played them in 6.0, and I thought they were pretty good, maybe on the strong side. When the change to 6.1 happened, I completely dropped them because I thought they were way too underpowered at that point. And then with the change to 6.2, with the change to Bleed, I really like that, and I think they're in a nice, viable spot where they are now.
Yeah, they were really good with Riot Troopers, right?
Yes, they are fantastic with Riot Troopers, which anyone who knows me knows that they're my favorite brand of trooper. Yeah, they're pretty good with Riot Troopers. It's nice to be able to make those Riot Troopers into a 3-figure group, and it makes it easier to reinforce them, which is always a plus.
Yeah, really good with Riot Troopers for that reason. And really interesting how, Strain is kind of this mechanic that lives in the Scum faction, but also a little bit in the Imperial faction, which, we base that off of, really, Joey, a lot of your list building with Imperial Strain. So Flametroopers are an interesting take on, like, what does Strain look like played by in the Empire faction compared to, like, Under Duress in the Scum faction. Any thoughts on Flametroopers? Anybody? Herbie, anything?
Yeah, I remember I played against, or Matt, you want to go? Go ahead.
Oh, you go, mate. You started. Carry
on. Yeah, I remember when they first came out, I definitely felt that they were way overpowered. Now, I haven't actually played with them. I played against them. And I'll say playing against them, I mean, it was against Joey, and Joey used them. I didn't feel like they were a huge part of the game, but you could definitely see how when he was using the Strain along with the Strain coming from the Riot Troopers, that I think them being in combination with the Riot Troopers is what really made them a nice combination. So I agree. I think they're in a good place. I don't see them as overpowered right now, but I do think that they've got a nice little niche there with the Strain element in Imperial.
I'd just add that I agree with the general sentiment that to begin with, their sort of napalm ability and resulting strain was quite punishing. But where they ended up, look, I played a game with them, very reliant on that last one to kind of get the strain, the sort of a general strain damage across a group of grouped up enemies. If they're not getting that off, they are an expensive unit for what they are. The 5.2 dice. Not especially, lots of health. So, probably for me, it's not a unit that I'm going to be picking all the time. But that said, I don't play a lot of Imperial.
Okay. Let's.
Yeah.
Oh, Destructor, do you have
I
anything?
agree with the consensus.
Okay. Nice.
No, just 6.0. They trapped Onar in purgatory for 10 million years, aka a full round, and absolutely obliterated Mando with a bunch of pushing abilities. That was when I decided I hated him. 6.1, they went up against Mando and got 2 damage over the course of 3 rounds. And now, thankfully, they do something. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually wary of giving them Pierce 1 and 6.2, but apparently that was the right call, so. Let's pivot off of Flametroopers then into trying to troopers in general. That was kind of one of the themes of this set, and it ended up being troopers were very strong, especially in the beginning of the season. And we also had 2 squad upgrades, which is something introduced in season 4, but it was limited to just the shore troopers, to just 1 unit. And then in this update, Rebels and Empire got squad upgrades that could go on any 2-figure deployment group. So let's talk about squad upgrades just in general. We can talk about Z6. We already talked about Flametroopers. Joey mentioned how having an extra third body made it easier to reinforce riot troopers. That was one of the interesting things that happens from squad upgrades. Another interesting thing that happens is how it interacts with stuff like squad swarm and strength in numbers, because it uses the combined deployment card cost and it doesn't add in the squad upgrade cost. What did you guys think about the squad upgrades? And let's kind of talk about the Z6 while we're talking about that. Matt, did you play with like Echoes in the Z6 or any of those trooper stuffs?
No, but sort of in terms of chaining, Adam and I play a lot of games because we're in the same time zone, and he was practicing and toying around with lists that would chain into one another, and getting all of those cards like strength and numbers and the one that allows you to activate 2 of the same type, and certainly if it all comes together, it's almost impossible to counter. I managed to counter one once by getting a Cara Dune blast off with the self-starter parting blow and ambush. But once that ability was gone, if he could chain those together, Death Troopers chaining into General Troopers with strength and numbers and squad swarm, it would be devastating on the deck, which does sort of move it towards more being luck based, which is something that I tend not to be a big fan of in these sorts of games. It certainly if it all comes together, it's too overpowered, and it's going to be very, very determinative on who wins a game like
that. Joey, what do you think of squad upgrades in this season?
The squad upgrades, I love the idea. The one issue that I have with them is that you have to walk a very fine line, because as the groups were released, like these 2-figure groups, they were bounced around the idea that there wouldn't ever really be a third figure in there. So you have to really be careful with how they're implemented. And I think the 2 that we've released, that you guys have released so far, have been really good and on point. But yeah, what was nice with the Z6 is I actually got Pathfinders to work.
They are pretty good with the Pathfinders.
Nice.
Yeah, Pathfinders.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't really. You're good. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the Pathfinders ended up being a little below the curve after season 4. I think they came out in. They weren't as popular as some of the other stuff that came out in IACP, but they do synergize quite well with the Z6s, mainly with that distracting ability that they have to let them really lean into the activation chaining. So I'm hoping Pathfinders get some play. I think they're pretty balanced. Herbie, you had some thoughts on the squad upgrades and the whole trooper meta in general early on. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, I think that was initially. I remember when the I don't know which one, if it was the first iteration of the Z6, but when the Z6 could get focused. Mm-hmm. Now it's been changed to autofocus, but it was essentially, a 4 dice shot. You just kind of focused the Z6, and then you had the Z6 in tandem with, whether it was the Echoes, and one of those being focused like that. I just thought, as Matt said, like sometimes these 3 activations or these 3 attacks from one activation was just, there was nothing you could really do. Like you kind of just, it almost felt like you were just attacking a queen piece to a certain degree, at least getting attacked by a queen piece, because you're getting these 3 solid attacks. And then not only that, but the Z6 also had I don't know if the original one had it, I'm pretty sure it did, the auto fire where you got 2 shots off. So
yeah, it did. It
just felt like a lot to handle. I think now, I'll be honest with you, I haven't used it, nor have I played against it since the 6.2, but I do think that the change that was made to kind of make it an auto-focus rather than allowing it to get 4 dice was definitely something that was needed.
Yeah. What did you think, Destructor?
I mean, again, I mostly stuck to Mando and Bib. I had a lot of thoughts there, but I played with and against it a couple times. I think removing the ability for it to get focused was good. If I remember correctly, it one-shotted a Dark Trooper with the first shot, and then one-shotted Thrawn with the second, and that just felt so bad. But it really goes back to the chaining activation thing, and just being able to go with three figures at once when one of those figures is worth so much, and especially with these specific figures because one of them is blast focused. He's got the blast and the rebel token and the bleed, so he leaves a big impact, and the other has a second shot. So it really feels sometimes it feels more like four shots that they're getting off.
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah.
lot,
Yep.
lot of attacks. Kind of takes me back 3 shots in one act, and then Han getting a shot and an end of round shot and possibly defensive shot, getting so many attacks from one activation or one group. Feels like a lot sometimes, but then again, Z6 you can pretty much only run with echoes, unless you want to try to get Pathfinders to work, and then we'll see. I guess if it ends up making into the meta, I do wonder if it'll be similar to Biv, similar to the ATRT, that there's just not much of a reason to run them, even though they're great.
Can I ask a question to Joey? What was your incentive to use them with the Pathfinders? Just the lower cost?
It was so with Pathfinders, it's the 6 cost group. So I ran two groups of them with Z8s. So you got strength in numbers, so you could get that total 6 off. And with distracting fire, you could do change of plans. So like you could go with one group, get the distracting fire, change of plans to re-ready that same group while they go with, I don't know, 3PO, and then get another whole group shot off.
But if you use strength in numbers, so if they're 6 and their attachment is 5, doesn't that still come out to 11? And
No,
you have
it
to use
counts. No, it comes as the group. The group is technically a 6 in terms of change of plans and that type of stuff. That's the one thing that's the balancing worry, that if we were to change squad upgrades, I would recommend the change to that specific aspect.
So it only so if you can actually use two groups back to back, and even though it's technically 11 points each group, they still count as 6 each.
Correct.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so imagine getting, what is that, 6, 7, 8 attacks, and if you get some focus, that's 8 3-dice attacks in one activation.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Yeah, so we did have
That
to.
is really their biggest strength.
Yeah, I'm still a little worried, honestly, about echoes, especially because they are very efficient. And if you have a list that is very Pierce focused, you're gonna have a bad time if they've got double echoes. But that's how it rolls. Yeah, do we have anything to say about echoes? I'm kind of, I don't know how to say about echoes. The only thing that got changed about them was they had that +2 accuracy innate to enable frontline. I think Destructor pointed out that it just made them good as snipers. So we moved that to the frontline ability itself, so they only got that when they were swapping out for a red die. Anybody have any thoughts on the echoes? I don't know.
Did they end up getting, what was it that they had before? They had like an auto accuracy, like in addition to that. And
Yeah,
now
they got a built-in +2 accuracy on all of their attacks.
Yeah, I think they're good. I haven't actually figured out how to use them well because, as you know, obviously they're incentivized to move up. I've tried using them before with Cara and her trooper trait, and with Kotun, and I haven't figured out a way to use them well. But yeah, they definitely seem like they have a lot of potential. I just haven't figured out the right formula how to use them.
Yeah, I actually, I think they're one of the few that I voted to not approve because I just find that the Pierce 2 was so much on like 4-point figures, but hopefully they don't become too much problem. I'm a big Jedi fan. I like Force users. I like playing Force user melee lists, so it might be a personal thing that I'm like, I don't really want to see a list that has all of these, like 4 of these that I have to deal with Jedi, but you know, we'll see how they do. They seem very efficient.
What's your take then on I had brought it up before about the snow troopers and the force push.
Oh yeah, so snowtroopers. That one I'm not as concerned about, but that's because I don't play force user brawlers that much. I am more into the like force user deflection lists and like force user spy lists. So I'm more about pinging people down with Jedi Luke and Yoda and deflection, and then finishing them off with force surge.
Yeah.
Yeah, the being immune to parting blow is not a huge worry for me. I don't know. I like snowtroopers where they're at. The spike boots feels like a flavor thing for the most part to me. Like, I don't think you're gonna lose a game because you can't push them. I understand that brawlers are dependent on that, but you know, Joey pointed out, just stand next to them. They can't move away from you without triggering it. So
let's just say that I suggested the ability, and even I admitted when I suggested it that it's mostly just a flavor thing. So if that helps anyone, I knew it would just be for flavor, but it's such a small amount of space on the card, and it's so simple. I figured why not.
yeah, and we'll talk about snowtroopers because they got a buff in 6.2 at the end. We got rid of their surge for Pierce 2 and replaced it with adding +1 damage to 2 of their surges. That's because we noticed that like they tend to, if they roll really bad, like if they over surge, then there's like nothing they can do to get damage to go through, and all of their abilities are dependent on them dealing damage other than Disruptor Rifle. So has anybody had any experience with that?
So I had a little bit of experience.
I told you so.
So what were you?
Sorry, you go ahead, Joey. I was just making a joke.
I have a little bit of experience with that, and I'm going to be frank. I found it to be almost a nerf. And you may be asking, well, that doesn't make any sense if you're adding damage as opposed to pierce. There's so many black dice with +1 blocks that Pierce 2 as a single surge is going to be great. So now if you want to get that effective +2 on the snowtroopers, you're not going to get that focus, assuming you didn't get that third surge. And I don't know if it was just me, but I didn't have that many edge cases where I rolled 3 surges. So for me, it felt like a downgrade to them. I know statistically, like math-wise, that it probably is a buff, but for me, it didn't feel that way.
No, I think you're actually right, Joey. So it was intended to be kind of a sideways update rather than a buff or a nerf. So it is a nerf in certain scenarios, of course, where you only have 1 surge. You'd rather have the Pierce 2 if you're not playing against Zillow Technique or Echoes. But we found that the like fail case where they don't do anything because they don't have a way to convert surges into damage was frustrating enough that we wanted to change it, and we thought that it wouldn't affect their overall power level, but it would make them less frustrating in terms of like bad rolls on this 11-point card that you put in your list.
Not being able to focus isn't great, but when you're in the middle of the fray and your opponent is going to kill whichever one you focused anyway, you are probably not going to get enough surges to focus all of them. Yeah, I've dealt with that, just only being able to focus one, both in 6.1 and 6.2 when I played the Snows. Focusing one guy, and then that's the guy that they just pile on. And at that point, it hasn't made much of a difference in the games I've played anyway, so.
And then the last thing we had for troopers was covering fire, so that was really strong. It's basically the same as the original card, but we added a +1 surge universal bonus to all troopers during that round. That ended up being too strong, but it took us a while to figure out how to fix it without making it not worth 3 points. So the solution was to just hide 3 troopers when you play it, and we feel like that has actually made it pretty good and actually kind of gave it a little bit of a defensive flavor too. I don't know. Joey, have you played Covering Fire? I'm sure you have, right?
Yeah. I think that when it first came out in 6.0, it was definitely a little too much on the strong side because you could stack it with a whole lot of stuff. In the current version, the 6.2 version, I just find it hard to bring it for 3 points. Because I've always found that the best form of crowd control is always death, and I would rather be spending my surges on my +2s as opposed to my surges for stun. And so it just when it stopped giving out the surge, then sure you get the 3 hiddens, but it doesn't work as well with like pure trooper lists as it did before. I personally would have made it to where you still give everyone the surge, you can't surge for +2 if they're stunned already. But yeah, that's my take on it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly with the destruction of being able to use it with a giant swath of troopers, especially you know how much I fight for the elite stormies coming back into the meta. It's not being able to do that anymore is sad. Although personally, I think a lot of it might come down to multiple attacks in a round or whatever. So maybe you give everybody a surge token or something. But yeah, not being able to use it on your weaker figures, like that was what made it really cool in the first place, was just being able to stack with even regular stormies.
I played with it a lot and against it as well. And it's a card that firstly it depends a lot on when you draw it. It's something that's powerful at the beginning of a game and certainly a lot less so later on in the game. So there's a luck-based element to it. But secondly, I in the games that I've played, I don't feel like it was ever a card that was played at a certain point that was quite determinative in the outcome. Not like, say, an Assassinate that gives you the 3 damage to take down a Queen piece, or an On the Lam to, save one of your characters like Han Solo and get a return fire off at the same time. In the same way that those 3-point cards can really change the landscape of the game, it funnily enough, although it would suggest that it would, it tended not to. Might be the current map design. I was talking to Adam about this, and a lot of the maps are fairly large maps. So if somebody plays it at the beginning of the second turn, the sensible course of action, if you're defending against it, is just to retreat, and it's very hard for the attacking player to really get full value out of it in that round.
All right. Well, the data I have
Is good.
Data I have for 6.2 shows that it's still pretty good when somebody draws it.
I was always gonna say
that's
that the hidden
preliminary.
is still helpful.
That's preliminary. We'll see. We'll have to see if people still keep using it in their trooper lists, especially over Grenadier. Interesting that they have 2 3-point options now. Hey everybody, so I'm actually going to cut the video right there. We actually talked for almost 2 hours with this discussion, and this video is going on almost an hour and a half now, so I don't want to make this too long. I want to make sure people are able to listen to the whole discussion. So in the next part, I'm going to be sharing the rest of our discussion where we talk more generally about IACP, we talk about faction balance and things like complexity in IACP and making it more accessible to people. So make sure to turn into that video. And by the way, if you like content like this, make sure to let me know in the comments. If you enjoy listening to discussion amongst community members, these videos do take a deal of work to edit sound and to make everything sound good and get all the pictures up in the right time in the video. So also, if you appreciate all the work that goes into these, and if you want to give back to the channel, patreon.com/IACommand is taking people's donations and contributions, and we greatly appreciate it if you do contribute. It is something that is a motivator for me to keep making videos. I would say if my Patreon balance ever hit 0 monthly balance, it would be difficult for me to justify continuing working on this channel. But I really appreciate all of you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting IACP. We'll catch you next time in the next video. Make sure to leave a comment if you enjoy this type of content. Okay, bye.